We first started off the event with our keynote. We had a keynote speaker, and Patrick did an amazing job. And we had our second note speaker, and Greg did an amazing job of describing the landscape, but also introducing to you a lot of what was coming at you this week. And now we have our EndNote speaker. And those are named for that reason because we really want to set certain tones for you all the way through. And we hope that you've had a chance to enjoy the community that we built. And one of the examples of that community is our next speaker, who I've known for about 20 years or so, originally when he was at Apple, and he has been a speaker at our event for the last few years, one of which started with a mic drop. We asked Sal to round things out because he's just got a wonderful way about him, and he's going to tell a story about how he sees certain ways of doing things that not a lot of people always realize in there, and he's got even a special announcement maybe that he's going to do. But at the end of the day, I want to make sure that people know about Sal. Number one, he is the AppleScript guy, period. And he is still doing a whole bunch of stuff. He's taking the work that he did at Apple, and he's kind of continuing that methodology forward. He's working with folks like Omni Software and a whole bunch of other clients that are out there. If you ever have something that you want to know something about on the AppleScript side, you go to his website, OS 10 Automation, macOS Automation, and .com, and you can reach out to him, and he is really, really great about getting back to folks. So, without further ado, because that was already too much, how about a very warm welcome for our EndNote speaker, Sal Soghoian.
Pass the baton.
There you go.
This is rather complex. Whoa.
Left, right.
Left. First of all, thank you, Neil. Thanks, Ed, the MacTech team, and you for making Naomi and myself part of your family this week. We really appreciate it, and it's thrilling to be with such intellectual giants and to learn a lot about IT and admin, just hanging out with you guys and talking to you. I'm all about automation. I'm all about the concept of making it easier for you to do something and empowering you. So today I'm going to be talking about a kind of automation, Mac-based automation, that you might not have thought of before. And it's a way to increase your knowledge base, up your stock, all kinds of different approaches of enabling you to do more without having to do a lot of learning involved. So today, my agenda is we're going to be talking about how to create a Mac station that will automatically set up iOS devices when they are plugged into it. It will require a Mac, and will also require, different iOS devices that we're going to manage. And they're going to be tethered to the Mac via a cable. We're not going to be doing a Wi-Fi thing today. And it also will require a minimal amount of user interaction from the user. We don't want the user to have to do very much at all. Minimal amount. And the best part is it's going to be an easy setup for you. No code writing at all. Now, I know you're saying, well, no code is interesting. I kind of like that. But why are you talking to me about iOS devices? I'm a Mac guy. And that's true. Everybody in here is all about Macs and Mac administration, but it's really rare to find any place that doesn't have both iOS devices and Macs together in one environment anymore. And this is really an interesting use of how to use the Mac to make your life with iOS better. And so let's look at how to take what we know about the Mac and the automation tools that we have on the Mac and make it easier to manage iOS devices. And so first of all, let's just kind of review the different strategies for managing iOS devices. There's basically two strategies that we're going to deal with. The first one is one-to-one. And in that scenario, we have people get assigned an iOS device. I'm going to say iPad here as a representative of iOS device. They get assigned an iOS device, and it stays with them no matter where they move geographically or org-wise within their organization. That iOS device stays with them, and it's assigned to them. It has an identity for them. And that's basically like a one-to-one strategy. The second type of management strategy that we're going to look at is shared use. And in that, the device has a generic identity, and it's used by the staff at the company or the organization. And then when they're done with it, they pass it to the next group that comes in, who then will pass it to the next group that comes in. So in shared use, you have a limited set of devices that are used by a lot of people. In one-to-one, every person has their own basic set of devices. So those are the two strategies. The one that we're going to pay close attention to today is the shared use. Let's take a look at how that actually gets used in the real world. Well, one of the first uses of shared use management is in the medical and healthcare professions. You go into a hospital now, and people have iPads. The medical staff have iPads. The people that check you in have iPads. The doctors have iPads, and quite often they give you an iPad as well. So there's a lot of iOS devices in the medical field now. It just makes for easier input, better communication, and a friendlier environment, and more portable. And you can manage the information. So shared use you'll see a lot in the medical professions. Another one is in retail and hospitality industries, those kind of things. In hotels, you'll see people with iPads that can check you in. In retail stores, you go into a store and a lot of times the person will have an iPad or an iPhone that can do point-of-sale purchasing or pull up information about what it is you need to know. It's very common in those markets and those services to have those devices as standard part of the environment. Now, also there's professional use of iOS devices too, from a wide gamut of everything from construction to, let's do that again. Back up. I did a little too far. Come on, there we go. Professional. And it just went on its own to education. I'll talk about professional with the education going. So in professional, a lot of times in first responders will have portable devices. A lot of times lawyers and legal will now carry portable devices as a way of tracking information as well. And it's common that in professions, the iOS devices are used. And in some situations where there are limited budgets, you'll quite often see shared use of iOS devices in education, in classrooms like this. So the concept of shared use is very common. Here's another one that I recently became aware of that's growing every day, and it's through libraries and higher education as checkout. A lot of students will, even though they own laptops, won't take them to class. They'll show up at the lecture hall, wipe their student ID, check out a device, take the notes, upload it to Dropbox, and then plug it back in. So you're starting to see a lot more universities, higher education, and libraries do this checkout kiosk kind of idea as well. Another example of iOS shared use. So when it comes to managing iOS devices in these two environments, in one-to-one, you have the device enrollment program and you have volume purchase plan that are now encased in the Apple portals for education and for business. But when it comes to shared use, they rely on a piece of software called Apple Configurator. Now, Apple Configurator is a visual program for managing iOS devices. And you often see it used in conjunction with these type of storage and charging stations, like these here from Bradford. I have a D20, or these carts. You often see a lot of iPads be used with a Mac running Apple Configurator and plug directly into it. Now, for those that haven't used Apple Configurator, let me show you a little bit about the interface on it. It's designed for you to have a visual interaction. The different devices are represented by icons, and if you click on them, you can see the information about them. And there are controls for, uploading apps onto it, controlling the profiles. All the different aspects of that device can be controlled visually from within Apple Configurator. Now, in addition, there's a menu that contains all the different types of commands for restore, update, refresh, erase, applying profiles. All the different type of things that you want to do to a device are available in Apple Configurator. But it does assume that you have a certain level of knowledge about the whole concept of managing devices. I mean, like, what is a restore versus an update versus an erase? What is supervision? You got to know about MDM profiles. Things like that we take for granted, the average person might not know what those are. For professionals like yourself and your staff, that's not a big deal. But even professionals would be surprised to find out that the people who are actually in charge of managing these devices don't know anything about MDM or supervision or anything like that. And these people are accidental administrators. Every company has them. Someone might have left their job and somebody else is suddenly put in charge of 50 iPads. Somebody got promoted or something happened, and all of a sudden the organization moves, and somebody that's not really technical about it suddenly has to manage these devices. And as an administrator, your challenge is, can you create a set of tools that make it easier for these people to do their job? And the answer is yes. And you can use automation because Apple Configurator supports Automator. And using Automator and Apple Configurator, an administrator like yourself can create a simple workflow by dragging in different actions that are designed to work with Apple Configurator and creating an automation recipe. Basically, that's what a workflow is. It's a series of actions that are executed from the top down and data being passed between them. It's an automation recipe. And you can create this type of recipe in a simple application that you can use to help somebody is to save that. And if you save that workflow into the scripts folder in your system, then it gets installed automatically in the system-wide script menu. So when your accidental administrators have to administer devices, they simply plug in the device, go to the script menu, choose the workflow that you created for them, and let that run. It will run on the devices, do all the different things that it needs to do, erase, manage, enroll, all that kind of stuff. And everybody's happy. It's a very simple scenario, a simple example of how you can use the built-in automation in macOS to make it possible for somebody in your organization to manage a small group of iPads. If somebody has 20 or 30 iPads, this is a great solution for them. You can solve their problem. And built in to Configurator are all these different actions. All of these things are built in, and you can use those to create these automation recipes. If you need to customize it, you can do things like add a run AppleScript action that you can put in AppleScript or AppleScript Objective-C, or you can do a run JavaScript action, or you can even add in run shell script actions where you can add any of your favorite shells or Perl or Python and Ruby, and you can change the arguments to be standard in or as arguments either way that you want. And you can add these into your workflows to customize them to what you need. But even with that set of tools, it still is hard for people who are actively employed, who are physically moving around, to get to a computer to do something. We need something that's simpler than getting in front of a computer and simpler than going to a menu and selecting something. For this set of people, we can provide a different type of solution, and it's based upon a very fundamental principle. It's the principle of attachment. So what we're going to look at is we're going to examine how to create an automated scenario for iOS refresh as soon as it gets attached to the Mac. That's all they're going to have to do is just plug it in. They won't have to go to a menu. They won't have to make any other choices. And you're going to do this for them without writing a line of code. Ooh, interesting now. Okay, I'm starting to get this. You mean I could up my stock in the company? Yeah, I can handle that. Oh, yeah. And I don't have to write any code. Well, now I'm interested. So we're going to look at a couple things that make this possible. And we're going to examine these. Today, you're going to walk out of this room with a couple sets of tools that make you incredibly powerful and dangerous. And the first thing we're going to look at is Apple Configurator. We're going to examine what do you have to do to set this up. Then we're going to look at creating an automator workflow, what is involved in that. Then we're going to look at how do we turn on content caching so that we can store stuff that gets sent on to these devices. Then we're going to look at how do we manage those devices using MDM. We're going to have a couple different options for doing MDM with our devices. And then finally, a term I made up myself. It's called a tether response chain. We're going to create a tether response chain, a TRC, man, of course. I was doing a TRC the other day. A tether response chain is how this whole thing gets triggered when they plug it in. So let's begin with device management. For my first example, I'm going to take the simplest form of MDM, okay? I'm going to use Jamf Now. Does anybody here use Jamf Now? It's very elementary, very simple interface for managing devices. And I'm going to use it as an example of how you can include management in this automated process. So with Jamf Now, you get a Jamf Now account. You get 3 devices free. I think anything over 3, you start paying $2 a device per month or something like that. But it's a great place to go and try stuff out without having to pay for it. You create this, and then you can use Jamf. So you go to the Jamf Cloud URL, you enter your username and password that you signed up with, and then you basically get this. There's a tab on the left for devices, and then there's a tab for blueprints. Blueprints are a common set of settings that you're going to apply to a device. Then there's also something called open enrollment. We're going to use that, and that allows the device to enroll in MDM. And that's our first example. We'll be using that strategy instead of a zero-touch policy. So we're going to turn that on. You select it, and then there's a checkbox naturally over on the right. You like the way can you follow that cursor? Is it big enough for you? Yeah. We're going to select that, and then you're going to enter an access code. Just make up an access code. You're going to put that in there, put it on a sticky note, stick it to your screen. That's all the security we need for that. And once you click turn on and you activate open enrollment, it provides you with a URL enrollment link that's just for you. And copy that. We're going to pay attention to that a little bit later. So then you can go to your blueprints, and by default you get a one blueprint. It's called your default blueprint. And when you select that, it has all of the settings for controlling the apps are on there, the profiles, the configuration stuff, all the different aspects about the device. You hit those tabs and set it the way you want. For example, if I want the wallpaper to be a certain wallpaper, I would set it in the default profile, and that's what I've just done here. So in our example, I'm going to change the wallpaper of the thing. So that's the first thing, device management. Next, let's look at what we do with content caching. Now, when you deal with iOS, even though it's a mobile device, it sure can have a lot of stuff on it. the updates to the OS are considerably large, and then the apps can be very big, and heavens knows that the books and all the other stuff can be rather big too. And if you're trying to get this onto your mobile device over Wi-Fi, forget about it. Too hard. Too hard. You can't depend on mobile device. You can't depend on Wi-Fi to try to transfer this stuff onto your device. We have an attached cable that's going to give us the power. And even better, we got a place to store this stuff so that we won't have to keep downloading it every time we want to update. We're going to use the attachment, and we're going to use the content caching built into macOS. If you go into the sharing preference on macOS, on the left-hand side, you click the content caching button and you turn it on, and it's going to tell you that this will be noticed by everybody on your network, and if you like, they can draw from the cache that you're going to create. If you click the options button on the right-hand side, you will be able to set the size and the kind of content that you want to store. Right now, we're going to be storing software updates, apps, and iTunes Store, books, and music, as well as videos. We'll click the option, and then you have the controls for setting the size of the cache, and you can even clear it. All of this is built into macOS for you. So all of the caching service for any iOS device is already on your Mac. So the Mac that we're going to be using for our little automated setup machine, we turn on content caching and we forget about it. We don't have to worry about it again. The next time we download the update for iOS 12, it's stored on the Mac and it goes out locally over the network, especially when the iOS device is attached via cable. So that's content caching. Now, let's look at what we have to do with Apple Configurator. There's a little bit of setup we have to do. It's not a lot. We have to create a supervision identity. And that's basically who we say we are. And we go to the preference pane, we click on organizations. There's a little button down there for a plus sign, and we start this. And we're basically going to create our supervision identity. If you do want to enroll in device enrollment program, you can do it right here in the supervision identity. We're not going to do that. We have a small group of iPads. I don't need device enrollment for this. I'm just going to add in information about my company, who I am, and everything, and then I'm going to say, create a new supervision identity. I'm going to put in my password because I'm creating a certificate, and then voila, I've created a supervision certificate that I can use when managing these devices. Now, when you're managing the devices, you need something to represent this identity. And to do that, we're going to use supervision certificates. And we can export the supervision identity out as certificates that we can reference in our workflow. To do that, yes, there's the magic cog. Notice the magic cog. I'm pointing to it with the red arrow. Okay. We're going to go over there and we're going to choose to export the supervision identity. And when you do that, you can export it two different kinds of ways. One as a encrypted P12 file, or the one that we're going to use, which is two separate files, a certificate and a private key that we're going to use just for automation. When you do, it's going to say, hey, you're exporting your supervision identity as two keys that you're probably using for automation. We just want to let you know that you're doing that. And you go, okay, yeah, I know. Now, you want to keep those because they represent your identity. So what I usually do is I create an encrypted disk image and I put them in there. And then when I need to use the machine as a little automated server, I mount my disk image and I'm good. That way I can keep track of them easily. So when I choose to export, I get my certificate and my private key. Next, we need to install the automation tools. And you go to the application menu in Apple Configurator and you choose Install Automation Tools. And it asks you if you want to do that. You choose yes, put in your password, and it installs a very powerful utility called CFG Util. This is a really cool thing. It basically gives you command line control of any iOS device right from your Mac. Ooh, lots to muck with. It's very powerful and it can be quite confusing. It's not re-entrant protected or anything, so there's best ways to use it are using it through Automator and the pre-configured way that we just set up. So we're going to use this as the foundation of how we're communicating to our attached devices. So now you just installed the automation tools. Next, we need to create a couple configuration profiles. One for Wi-Fi for our device to see the network, and then one for a web link to our enrollment. So in Configurator, you can create profiles right there. You choose New Profile from the File menu. Then you have the type of profile on the left and the data about it on the right-hand side. So every profile has the same kind of general information. It has the name, the type of profile, how you want to have it stick around. Do you want it to be able to be deleted or not? What kind of security do you want to apply to it? Those things. Every profile you create, you fill out this part of it. The profile that we're looking for is the Wi-Fi profile. So we're going to select that and create a Wi-Fi profile for our local network here for our device. And we're going to give it the name of the network, the password, that kind of stuff. And then for security, you can choose any kind of security that you're using. Right now I have it set for WPA2, but if you have your corporate network, this dialog will change to handle all the different kind of certificates you need for that. Currently, I'm just setting it for WPA2. And basically, that's my settings. I saved the profile. Next, we're going to create a profile that's a web clip. And you select it at the bottom. And then you basically give it the URL that you want the web clip to point to. And we have a URL just in mind. We put our enrollment link right in there. That's where we copy our enrollment link. And then we also want to make sure it's full screen because we want it to look cool. Then you save that, we have our profiles. So that's all the setup that we need for a configurator. We basically installed the automation tools, made a couple profiles, and that's all we had to do and create an identity and export the certificates. So now let's look at Automator, at what does the workflow look like for managing an attached device. So Automator is our automation recipe guy. Otto is our hero. Using him, we can drag and drop and create our workflow. I created a web page on configautomation.com. That's my website for dealing with attached devices. And there's a link on the right-hand side called Attached Workflow. You're going to go there, and it will contain everything that you need to do your workflow. So we're going to go to, first of all, under the new supervision of Mojave, you have to say, I want to allow third-party actions. So you go to the Automator application menu, choose Allow Third-Party Actions, make sure you click the checkbox, and then go OK. And that will allow you to load the Automator actions I'm providing for you. So now we can create a workflow. And let's look at what that looks like. We're going to create just a standard workflow file in the template. We'll start with that. And then we're going to add actions to it. We'll add the begin attachment workflow. Then we'll add an erase device. Then we're going to prepare the device. Then we're going to wait for our authenticate activation. Then we'll install profiles on the device. And then we're going to go end attachment workflow. And that'll be our workflow. It will run from the top down. It's our little recipe for an attached device. And let me walk you through what each one of those actions will do. So we save that as a file. We're going to put it into the workflows folder in your user library folder. User library workflows, and we're going to call it attachment workflow.workflow and home library workflows folder. You can put it anywhere you want. I just think that's a really good location because you'll know where it is. Now let's look at what each action does. The first action is the one that does most of the heavy lifting for us. So what this action does is when a device is attached to the Mac, this workflow will run and this action will automatically get all of the information data about that device. Its ECID, UID, all the different data about it, and write it into a little property list file on disk. And the reason that you do that is because during the process of getting erased and reformatted and everything, an iOS device will automatically disconnect itself from the computer and then reconnect, thereby triggering that whole process again. What this action does is it looks to see if there's a stub, and if there is, ignores the request and allows your workflow to keep running properly. All of this is handled for you. It's done automatically by this action. So if you want to see those stub files, there's controls there for doing it. And if you want to add the serial number for some reason to your stub file, you can do it with that. The second thing this action does is this. When you attach multiple devices to the USB port on a Mac, the USB port on a Mac is not designed to handle 10 devices simultaneously. You need to have something that kind of does a load balancing, that delays certain ones until the other ones are completed. And this action will handle all of that process for you as well. So there's nothing you need to do but have this action at the beginning, and it will make your workflow reentrant protected, and it will also make the whole machine load balance so you can put 40 devices on one Mac. The next action we're looking at is just the erase action, and it will do exactly what it says. It will erase the user from that device. You don't need to interact with this action at all. The next action is the largest one. It's the prepare. And this prepares the device. If you want to use an advanced MDM, here's where you would put in your URL and your certificate and everything else that you need to do. We're not going to do that. We're going to use an enrollment instead of this, but that's where it would go. Next, we'll make sure the device is supervised, and we'll put in information about our certificate. We'll choose from the pop-up and point to our certificate that gives us the authority to supervise that device. And that's why we exported our certificates. We'll fill in the information about our company or whatever you wanted to put in there, and then you can choose which one of the startup screens you want to see on your device. If right now I have it set for none, so I don't want to see any of those startup screens when I start the device. And you do want to pick your language and locale from that pop-up, because that saves a lot of hassle. Otherwise, they have to go through these long messages saying, I'm not from Albania. Okay, very good. So that's the prepare action, and then this action just waits until the prepare action is completed and the device is activated. And it's just a waiting process that keeps checking every so often. So you don't need to do anything with that. And then finally, we have a install profiles. So we're going to choose the profiles that we created. We're going to put them in there. And we're going to choose the option to install those without any user interaction. And it's going to go, wait a minute, dude, you have to be somebody to make that happen. And we go, but we are somebody, and I can prove it because I have 2 certificates. I have a certificate and a private key. And that's where you select them right there, and that will give you the authority to install profiles on the device without any user interaction. And then the last thing is the end attachment action. Its job is just to look for the stub and kill it. And then it's done. So there's our workflow. Again, if you click the link on Config Automation, there's the sample workflow already pre-done for you. You can edit this workflow and change it any way that you want. You can change the settings in the prepare, or if you like, you can add in custom actions, whatever you like. I'm just providing a simple example of the most basic kind of MDM story. Okay, so that's Automator. Then the last thing we need to look at is how do we make this happen automatically when you attach a device? And this is magic. This is the secret sauce that nobody knows but you. Okay, we're going to create an attachment agent. We're going to create a command script. And we're going to use an Automator workflow that we just created. So those are the three things that make the tether response chain, now that you know what that is. So in the CFG util, there is a very powerful command. It's this one, exec, whatever, execute. But it's just for attachment. It will sense and execute whenever a device is attached or detached from the machine. It knows about that device and will run. Be aware, it's not reentrant. It doesn't have all the protections that the Automator workflow gives you. So if you try to do this from the command line, you're not going to be successful as if using Automator. And it does provide a whole series of properties about the device name, its kind, its UUID, its ECID. It has a lot of information. And when you use that command, there's usually two strategies you can follow. You can create a terminal session running that command that then will execute a command file that then executes a workflow. If you want to, you can run it from the terminal and sit there and watch the spew come back and see everything that's happening on the device. But what we're going to do is create a launch agent that runs a shell command that executes the workflow. And that's going to be our strategy for this scenario. So the launch agent looks like this. It's a very simple agent. There's not a lot to it. There's basically a couple properties there about stay open and stuff. There's, I have my company identifier there. But the one part that's really important is if we unwrap this to a single command string, you'll see there's the CFG util exec-a and then the path to the attachment command. You're going to want to go into that file and change the username to whatever the username is on the machine that you're setting up. That's the one thing you got to do there. If you call that code, then you're writing code. But I don't really call that code. That's just like, changing the name, right? And then you're going to take your launch agent and you're going to go home library launch agents. And you're going to put it in there. And that's all you have to do for your launch agent. And here's a little tip. If you take these two shell scripts, these two single-line shell scripts, and what they do is they target the launch agent and they use launch control to load and unload, and you save those as shell scripts into the scripts folder in your user library, you'll have them up here on the script menu so you can turn your machine off or on as a connectivity machine. Ooh, that way you won't forget to accidentally plug in your own phone and have it erased like happened to me. I learned that one. Oh, that's how that came up with these things right there. I made that right away. Good thing I had iCloud backup. Okay, so that's our strategy. We're creating a launch agent. It runs this one little file, the command file, that executes a workflow. So what does the command file look like? Well, here's what the command file looks like. Most of it is just trapping for error. If the device is pulled out by the user for some reason, it understands that the user messed up and will just error out. That's what most of it is. But there's two sections I want to show you that are really important. This one is, you'll notice that there's all these different environment variables. So when this gets executed by the CFG util, it grabs all the data about the device and puts it into environment variables that get passed into the script. So you can see I have like ECID, I have path, UUID, device name, firmware version, location, build version, all that stuff. So what that one line does is it executes an Automator workflow and passes the environment variables into the workflow as its input. So you'll see Automator is the command on the left-hand side, and then Here's the environment variables as input after -i, and then you'll see workflow path. And the workflow path, I made it generic so that if you just put the workflow in the library workflows folder where I told you to put it, and you call it attachment-workflow.workflow, it's going to just execute. So you won't have to edit this file at all. I just want to explain what this file does. Its job is grab the data about the device, hand it to Automator, and tell it to run the workflow. And that's what it does. So that's our command file. And the Automator workflow we already created, so you know what that does already. So those are our 3 parts of our tether response chain. The workflow and the command, put them in the workflows folder in your home library workflows. Launch agent goes in the launch agents folder in your user library as well. And that's pretty much most of the prep you got to do there. We're done with the prep. So what does it look like when we actually connect a device now? Here's what happens. So here's our Mac sitting there, and Bob comes in and goes, I got the device. How do you update this? And you go, Bob, plug it into the thing, go get a donut. And so you plug it in like that, and then here's what happens. The device will get sensed, the command gets run, the workflow gets run, it's already erasing the device, and then it's done the formatting, installed the profiles and everything else. It gives you the Hola home screen, then you connect to your Wi-Fi, it's already set up for you. You must approve, yes, I approve. No, now I get advertising. There's no way to turn off the advertising. So we're advertising about all the new features, and then you have your device. So we go to our little enrollment screen that we created through a profile. There it is. It's their Jamf thing. They put in their name and the access code you created and put it on the sticky note on your computer, and they log in. Voila. And then they go through the wonderful process of iOSification, where you are taught how to tap dialogues in different places on a regular basis. Then once you've learned how to tap dialogues on a regular basis, you're done. Then you get back out to the desktop. So the MDM takes over, and you'll see the new wallpaper come down just as a split second there. So I'm going to log out of the machine so we can see our home screen. There's our wallpaper. And I'm going to log back in, and we're back into the device. The device has been erased, enrolled, everything. All Bob had to do was plug it into the computer and have a donut. And that's it. So that's the simple scenario for doing device enrollment. So now the administrator, whether it's you or whoever's in charge, can go to their Jamf account, refresh the page, and the device will show up there. And then they can select that device and apply any kind of controls that they want to apply to the device, and it will update to the device over Wi-Fi. And that's the basic attachment scenario. Voila, everybody's happy. Simple. All they have to do is just attach to the device, and it works. So you can create a solution for the accidental administrators that enables them to handle iOS devices easily, just upon attachment. You create 1 or 2 different workflows for different scenarios. One workflow for updating the OS that you rarely use, and then one workflow for just refreshing the device so that they know they come in and they put it into the cart, plug it in, come back when it's done, and the device is pretty much ready to go. Now, this is a common scenario, more so than you would think. And it brings me to the point of talking about iOS devices as appliances. This is something that Apple really doesn't talk about. Not because it's a bad thing, it's a huge thing, and Apple does a lot of it. But they really don't talk about it because it's not about the device and you. It's not about that device enriching your life or whatever. It's about a device being used in professional situations as an appliance, like these pilots here from United that use that. United has a whole different set of software that is used by their ground staff and their flight staff to provide services. I know this for a fact because here's a picture of the ground agent. She was very shy. When I asked to take a picture of her and her iPad, she held the iPad up like this, but I thought it was really cool. So it's used by companies all the time, and United has 88,000 employees, and I would guess that a large percentage of them, maintenance and otherwise, come in contact with that, which gets you thinking of, like, what percentage of the sales of an iPad actually go to this type of shared use scenario, where it's an appliance? And I would bet that it would be quite a bit. And Apple has a tool that they use when you need to professionally manage shared use devices so that there's zero touch, so that you can go from a pallet of iPads to delivered devices quickly. And it's called the Apple Provisioning Utility. This hasn't been shown. I'm showing you this, and you can't go online and see this video. This is an actual video of this tool in action, and it uses all the principles that I just laid out for you. It basically uses the same architecture, a little bit more advanced, a little bit more refined, but the same tools I just handed you are present here. It's created by the services group, professional services team at Apple, which I do contract with and work on this utility because it's a great automation tool, and I love contributing to the project, and the guys on the team are absolutely amazing. But this tool is used by professionals around the world. It's used by different organizations where they have tens of thousands of iPads to manage. Whether it's retail, whether it's law enforcement, no matter what kind of position that these companies are in, this type of device is really powerful. And what it allows you to do is you can do up to 40 different iOS devices per Mac at a time. So if you have 5 Macs with this set up and you're doing 40 per, you're doing like 200 iOS devices simultaneously. It has a dynamic dashboard interface. It requires minimal setup. You basically create an Automator workflow like I showed you, and that gets run on all these devices. In addition, it doesn't use over-the-air. This is all through attachment, so massive data transfers across. There's a lot of scenarios where you can't depend on a Wi-Fi network being there, but the device still needs to be ready to hand to a pilot. How do you do that? You can't rely on over-the-air network at an airport. You need something that's secure, that you can make sure that that iPad has the latest data about that plane and everything that the pilot needs. And that's why this type of scenario is really important. It provides direct data transfer so that the information comes from the caching server on the Mac directly onto the device. And it's really just pretty much, it's ready to go as soon as you detach. So here's what it looks like. I'm going to actually, this is going to run, I'm going to do 10 while I'm talking about this a little bit. So imagine that you're at a retail scenario. You have a retail shop, and your floor staff has iPhones or iPads that they use to go out and register with the customers and do everything that they need to do. Well, you don't have time to be sitting at a computer to say, okay, I need to set these devices up. What you want to do is have something running in the back room. You can peek your head in there and see, are any of the lights green yet? Or you can have a cart, like a Bradford cart that has lights on it, so that they can tell when a device is green that it's ready to go, and they can pick that up and start using it and take it on the floor. That way you get refresh of the device contents with updating of information, all the materials that you need on that device, but you don't have to manage it. It's all done upon attachment. You can just plug in the device in the back room and have it go to work, and you'll get a fast response. So this particular scenario that I recorded here is enrolling in Jamf Pro MDM. It's erasing, it's updating, installing new OS, and it should be pretty, it's getting closer, okay? And it should be just about kicking around now. Nothing like watching soup being made. Is it boiling yet? The potatoes are cooking. And there's a couple of them going right now. So the staff just peers in there, says, oh, okay, slot 3 is ready, pulls the device, and starts using the device. It's a fantastic tool for batch processing and managing Apple iOS devices through shared use. Okay, and that's what the Apple provisioning utility looks like in action. But, so because you're special, I was looking at this concept and the previous concept we talked about, and I said, is there something special I could bring the family down at MacTech? So I'm going to show you something that has not been seen anywhere at all. This is brand new, and I'm going to demonstrate it live. But first of all, I'm going to give it to you so that you can do the same exact thing yourself. And it involves Jamf Pro through attachment. How to create an attachment service that works with Jamf Pro. How many in here come in contact with Jamf Pro? A good number of you. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to create a small command script that talks directly to the Jamf Pro server. So when the command gets executed, it's going to change an extension attribute on the device. And by changing the extension attribute, it's going to put that device in a different device group. And then that's going to trigger the application of configuration profiles for that group. So we're basically going to make it so that you can take a device, walk up to a machine, plug it in, and it will instantly set up for a certain scenario. Then I can take the device, go to another machine, plug it in, and set it up for another scenario. Then I can take the same device, go to another machine, plug it in, and it will set it up for another scenario. So all I have to do to go to the other class is plug the device into the cart, let it charge, and then unplug it, and it's ready to use for my class. And here's how you do that. So if you have a Jamf Pro account, it's going to look something like this. So you see I have 3 device groups, right? Geography, science, and math. And then I'll show you the extension profiles. I created an extension profile that's called subject. And that's going to determine what class we're in, whether in math, geography, or science. Then you'll notice that there's configuration profile, and one of them is restrict to science apps. So when this configuration profile gets run, all the other apps on the device are disabled and hidden, and just the science apps are there. So combination of this profile will be assigned to my science device group. Make sense? Simple thing. So this is what the Jamf Pro will look like. And if I go over to the science group, you can see that it has the attribute, extension attribute of subject. And here is the script we had before, and here's the one that I'm giving you now. This is a very simple little script. It will connect to the Jamf Pro server and change the attribute of the device that is attached to the Mac. Let me walk you through it. I want to thank Tom Kohler from Jamf for working with me on this and developing this strategy and this concept. Like I said, nobody has seen this. Charles hasn't even seen this yet. If he's here. Is Charles here? No. Okay, he'll have to wait to see it. So the first thing is remember how the configuration utility passes in environment variables all this information about the device? The first thing we're going to do is grab the UUID and put that in a variable called UUID. And that's what that does. So the value of the UUID of the device will get put into the variable called UUID. Then here, you're going to edit this script, and you're going to put in your Jamf username, your Jamf password, and the Jamf URL that you use for your Jamf Pro server. And then here, what we're going to do is put in the attribute name and the attribute value. And in case your attribute has a space in it, I've added a little line that takes the space and percent encodes it for the URL. So you can use an attribute that has, 2 words in it. It doesn't have to be, jammed together or anything. We try to make things convenient for you. And then here is the command that makes the first call to the Jamf server. And what this does is it gets the ID of the extension attribute. It uses the information you provided, makes a call to the Jamf server, says, hey, I have an extension attribute for this account. It's called this. What's its ID? And then that returns us some kind of number that Jamf uses, and we store it. Then we use that information. You see the little variable there. We put the extension attribute ID and the value that we want in this little bit of XML. And then we pass that into one more call up to the Jamf server, also using the UDID, so that we're identifying the device, and we say change the extension attribute for this device to this value. And that's the basic script right there. And we're going to run that on attachment. And what you're going to see, I'm going to stand here and do this. I'll have 2 different iPads. I'm going to set it up. I'm going to pretend I have 2 different computers, and I'll switch between them. One will turn it green, and one will hide some apps and turn it blue. And so hopefully this is going to work, because this is live. Remember when people used to do demos? Well, here we go. All right. And I'm going to set up to do green. I have a device here. See that? Everybody sees that? I have my cable. Here we go. I plug this in, and we wait a couple seconds and see if the Jamf Pro server is awake. Please be awake. Ah. All right, let's switch it over to science class. Unplug that. So this should turn blue. This should turn blue and limit the apps, because I have a configuration profile that does that. Probably limit the apps first, I'll bet. Yep, there go the apps. And it's blue. So then if we go back into my Jamf Pro account and I do a search, you'll see that the iPads are now set. The extension attribute's been changed in those. All on attachment upon connection to a Mac. So today I've provided you with an interesting scenario. As Mac administrators, can you manage iOS devices without having to learn a lot about iOS? Yes. You now have the ability to create an automated Mac station that can be used to set up and refresh iOS devices on demand. And as a matter of fact, you can even use Jamf Pro to go the next step beyond and have it set up in very fancy ways using extension attributes. So you're going to go to configautomation.com. You're going to click the link on the right-hand side for the attached workflow. Once you do, you'll see there's a link for the Jamf on the other one. Everything you need will be there. You'll be able to download the Automator actions, the workflow file, the command file, and the launch agent. If you're using MDM, my examples are for Jamf Now and Jamf. So if you do want to add in automated enrollment and all the other fancy stuff, you can. But it's just about making yourself powerful, about having a good time, about how to make the most out of what you do and become very powerful and important persons at your company. And I thank you so much for letting me be here with you today.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's fair to say that he is the one and only Sal Soghoian. I still remember when you made the iMacs, the drawers, pop out to music. We have time for a few questions. So if anyone has a question for Sal. Okay.
So how easy in these flows to give each device its unique name, network name, and so forth? Is that possible? A unique name for each device.
Yes.
In other words, so it could go also into an asset system with a unique name.
Oh yeah, you could add any attribute you want or change it any way. I've made this very simple as an example. You can get very complex from this scenario. The main thing is that you're using the attachment architecture that's there. And this is the way you do it with a command that either runs a workflow or a command that talks to the administrative server. And all of that's based upon the exec command from config util. So go get the free Apple Configurator app, install it. And another benefit of it is there's a secret handshake between iTunes and Apple Configurator. Once you install Apple Configurator, iTunes stays quiet. It's great. It doesn't launch every time you put a device on.
Any other questions?
Was that semi-interesting?
That was...
Yeah? Okay, good. The next time I meet you guys, I want you all driving Ferraris. So we got to up your stock in the company, right? Yes.
Teslas don't count?
Okay, Teslas.
Ed, do you want to have some words? We're waiting for Neil. He's got lots of words. Oh, and Neil's right behind you.
Actually, nothing specific to the conference, but Sal, doing what you did with purely an MDM, is that possible without the Mac involved? Or would you say people who have implemented an MDM-only solution are at a disadvantage if they're not doing something like this?
Well, interesting question. You can use this as an augmentation to your MDM solution, as you've seen. So if you have a scenario where you're refreshing devices a lot, or you can't rely on the Wi-Fi network being there, this is absolutely something you want to turn to, because it gives you the ability to do it within closed environments. For example, the airport example is perfect, because in an airport, you don't want the individual devices connecting, because each one of those is an attack vector. You want it going through an Ethernet cable, through a firewall, onto one machine to do the authentication, and that's a scenario. So it's the best of both worlds, to answer your question, yeah.
Are we going to see a similar solution for the Mac? Oh, putting you on the spot.
Whoa. I cannot comment on that topic.
All right. Thank you very much, Sal.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
I'll do this in a minute.